Hey everyone, it's Dave and Olive. Thanks for joining us here at Book Blather today, where we talk about the books we've read recently to help spread the joy of reading. Today we're talking about a book called My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Okay, in our last video we talked about a few books that we had picked up at a recent haul at a used bookstore. And one of those books was a book that I'd wanted to read for a while called My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This was published pretty recently in 2020 by William Morrow. And it's a pretty controversial book. And the theme of the book is about a middle-aged man who has an illicit affair with one of his students. Now, the question posed in the title of this video was, is this a modern day Lolita story? Now, if you're familiar with that book, that when you hear about the theme of this one, that question immediately springs to your mind. If you're not familiar with that book, Lolita was a very well-known, highly acclaimed novel by Vladimir Nabokov. It was published in 1955. And that told a similar story of a middle-aged man who basically ended up having an illicit affair with what was his stepdaughter. Now, if you have read Lolita first, I think you will get more out of this book. That being said, it's definitely not necessary. I hear a lot of people saying that they've wanted to read Lolita, or that they have a copy of Lolita and they just haven't gotten it to it yet. And if you are planning to read both books, both Lolita and My Dark Vanessa, I would recommend reading Lolita first, because as I said, I think you will get a little more out of this with having read that novel first. But that being said, if you are not already planning to read Lolita, that should not discourage you from reading this book. It's definitely not required. There is a connection between them, but I think I can probably give you the requisite background to understand its relevance when you read this book. So the answer to that question of whether this is a modern day Lolita story is really yes and no. The two books are definitely connected, which I'll go into a little bit more. They are very similar stories, but they're also very different stories. So let's start with Lolita. This is my old Everyman's Library copy of Lolita that I've had for many years. This is considered by a lot of people as one of the best novels of the 20th century. This is one of my favorite novels. It may be my favorite, but it's definitely in the top couple. And this is not going to be a review of Lolita, but just a brief summary to give you the context and the relevance of this book. This tells the story from the perspective of a character named Humbert, who meets a woman who he needs a place to live, and she invites him to be a tenant at her place. And he does. Originally, he's not going to move in, but he meets this character, Lolita, who is a 12-year-old girl that he immediately becomes infatuated with. The woman, her mother, who owns the place that he moved into, she ends up falling in love with Humbert and gives him an ultimatum. And because he wants to remain close to Lolita, he marries her. And when she finds out that he's obsessed with Lolita, it leads to this calamity, and she ends up passing away. And so that kicks off the bulk of this story, which is Humbert and what is actually his stepdaughter, Lolita, going on a long road trip and engaging in this progressively developing, engaging in this long, illicit, inappropriate affair. Now, this book means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Some people love it. Some people hate it, of course, understandably, because of the subject matter. And people think that different people think that Nabokov had different intentions with this novel. My own personal opinion is that besides being just in terms of the prose a beautifully written book, The real brilliance of this novel was Nabokov's ability to take this character, Humbert, who was a clearly unreliable narrator, who thought he was doing nothing wrong but was engaging in these completely unacceptable activities, and was able to make the reader feel sympathy for this character. But we never actually see Lolita's perspective. And I think one of the reasons that works, and Nabokov is able to make you feel empathetic toward Humbert and to feel bad for him to some degree, is because we never actually get to see Lolita's perspective. Lolita is just presented as a socially and sexually precocious young girl who is somewhat manipulative early on in the novel and appears kind of cold later on in the novel. Enter My Dark Vanessa. The remarkable thing that Kate Russell does with this book is that she flips the script and gives us a very similar story, but this time from the perspective of the Lolita. In this case, our main character is Vanessa Y, and she is a 15-year-old high school student that goes to a private school, and her professor is Jacob Strain, and he ends up, at first being impressed with her in class and with an after-school club, and then grooming her and eventually developing this romantic, quote-unquote, relationship with her. Basically has this secret illicit affair. And what is remarkable about the story is that even though we are now seeing it from the other perspective, we are once again told this story through the eyes of an unreliable narrator. We do see Jacob Strain, and he is presented as a very similar character to Humbert, an individual that doesn't think he's doing anything wrong and instead views himself as a romantic that has all these feelings that can't be helped, and that it is a unique situation. We see it from the perspective of Vanessa as an unreliable narrator and what she goes through, how she what this grooming and relationship does to her, how she ends up, the feelings of importance and being seen and heard that she feels from this attention, how she views the relationship and how she views her power in the relationship based on his ability to manipulate her perception, how it affects her as time goes on. The story is told pretty much from two different time periods: when she's 15 years old in the year 2000, and when she's 32 years old in the year 2017. Although we do see her at different times and what's happening to her in between as they continue to have a sort of on and off relationship. But you get to see all these things from her perspective and see this story where both of the characters are really unreliable in their perception of this relationship because of what they both need it to be. And it's and of course you see all the it's of course like Lolita, a tragic story, has a really tragic impact on both of the individuals. And I thought Russell did just a phenomenal job of putting this book together. Number one, if you watch this channel, I'm real stickler for writing quality. This is not written like Nabokov prose, but it is an extremely well-written book. Mechanically, the writing is flawless, and a lot of the dialogue is really, really good. And there's a number of spots in this book where just certain things that are said, just quotes you want to write down, where you just you're like, whoa, you're really impacted by it. But she also, I think, just perfectly walked the line of showing you what she was doing. As I said, the connections between the two books are direct. It starts off with just the dedication right in the beginning of the book, which reads, for the real-life Dolores Hayes and Vanessa Wise, whose stories have not yet been heard, believed, or understood. Vanessa Wise, of course, is the main character in this book. Dolores Hayes was the legal name of Lolita in that novel. Humbert just gave her the nickname Lolita, or Lo. So you can see that the connection is right up there before the story even starts. And then Kate Russell specifically puts in a lot of parallels. You know, Humbert in Lolita was a literature professor. Jacob Strain is the high school English professor. One of the ways that Jacob Strain grooms Vanessa is he starts giving her copies of his books to talk to her about different kinds of literature. And one of the books that he gives her is Lolita, to introduce her to the concept of this kind of relationship and the romanticism of it. And that book, you know, makes appearances occasionally throughout this story. Russell makes the connections between the two books very clear. So when I'm reading books, you know, I'm kind of always like hunting for subtext and trying to tease out connections with things. And, you know, I'm not great at it. So sometimes I catch them, sometimes I don't. And, you know, a lot of books, they leave everything up to the interpretation of the reader. And personally, I don't love that. I like being given a little bit something. And I think Russell does a perfect job of that. She walks that line perfectly. She makes it clear, the connection between the two books and what she's doing. You know, you know, it's in the dedication. She makes these clear connections. She introduces the novel Lolita, and it comes up a couple of times, but it's not overkill, right? She is not trying to redo Lolita, because it is a very different kind of story, and I think that is the point. She is trying to tell us the story from the other perspective, and to show us that perspective can also be just as unreliable. And so I really appreciated that she did that. She kind of serves it to you and says, here's the connection, this is what I'm doing, but now go and have your experience with the story. And you know, I really appreciated that, and I thought it was perfect. So I would highly recommend this book. What I will say is it is more explicit than the subject matter is difficult to begin with, and some of the uncomfortable scenes are more explicit in this book than they were in Lolita. So you know, there's obvious trigger warnings for this if this type of book is not for you. But if you can handle this kind of book, or you're interested in this sort of thing, or what she's done with this book in relation to Lolita, I would highly recommend this. This is a definite 5-star read, and really good. I can't recommend this enough. Okay, so that's the end of the review of My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. If you've read this book, or you want to read this book, please leave us a comment below. Let us know your thoughts. I know this is a really controversial book, so I'm really curious, in particular this time, to hear what people have to say about it. If you're not comfortable saying anything substantive about this, but you made it to the end of the video, go ahead and leave Olive a puppy emoji. She always likes to see those. So as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell so that you get notified the next time Olive says it's okay to upload another video. Thanks so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.